So many of the litigants who appear in court don't have a lawyer, and for them to have any shot at all at justice, this is really the place where they can go so that they can navigate their way through the courthouse. And if you can't navigate your way through the courthouse, you can't get justice.
I am a gold card holder at the Los Angeles County Law Library. I use it frequently. I have been in the law library this week 3 times already, actually, and it's only Wednesday.
For years, we've honored the luminaries of Southern California legal community and people who've made a difference in people's lives. I've seen Justice Collins in her courtroom with the kind of majesty and grace and style that creates a lot of wisdom for everyone to follow, and also a lot of confidence that the system is working properly and that we've got great jurists. So how can you pick anyone better than Justice Collins as being, one of the beacons in our legal community, and our hats are off to her.
The impact she has had on the law and on justice is really immeasurable. She's been in the trial court, so she's had the experience of working day to day with litigants that are self-represented or who have counsel. Then she's been on the appellate court, where she is now looking at law from a different side, but always, and this is really something that just shines out from her opinions, both as an appellate court justice and a trial court judge, her North Star has always been the administration of justice, making sure that people get a fair shake, and really bringing to life the concept of due process and fair play. That's kind of what the law library does. It kind of equalizes the playing field, tries to make sure that justice is available. And that's really the story of Justice Collins' life, and that's why we picked her.
The reaction is, she is the nicest person. She's lovely. I mean, just across the board, everyone just kind of smiles when they talk about it.
Nobody deserves this honor more than Justice Collins. I've known her for many years. In fact, she was a law clerk in the Federal Public Defender's Office when I was an attorney like 40 years ago or so. She is great.
I first met Audrey when we were both young lawyers, and I went to a committee hearing for the state bar. Here was Audrey from the DA's office, who I'd never laid eyes on, and she proceeded to just deliver this incredibly thorough, thoughtful, she had read every level of all the materials, and I just thought, I love you, whoever you are. You're going to be a big success someday. You're the best.
The fact that she was a granddaughter of a slave and that she persevered through all of the adversity that she must have faced is really inspiring, especially myself as a woman of color.
When I first applied for the judge, the first time I didn't make it. And I remember she was one of the people who said to me, try it again, don't give up. So that was another thing that I learned from her is don't give up.
Audrey Collins came into the room. We talked to her for a half an hour, and Justice Vano Spencer on one side, Justice Joan Dempsey Klein on the other. After she left, we turned and we looked at each other and we said, that is our federal district judge. There was never a question in our minds.
She treated everyone with dignity, respect, and everyone admired her for that.
I appeared before her and I walked out and I said to the client, we lost, but you know what? We had a judge who understood the issues, understood the facts, understood the law.
When you have somebody who dedicates a life the way she has dedicated hers, there aren't too many judges and justices that everybody, win or lose, said, man, she treated us fairly. She can do that. Not too many can do that.
So generous with her time and her ideas. A true colleague in every sense of the word. All the candle power one could ever want.
She's so soft-spoken, but at the same time, she's very firm. And she has a reputation well earned for being such a fair judge and individual.
She understands people who've been harmed. And she also understands people who've harmed them.
She goes out to the community, she speaks to everyone, and she makes everybody understand that they are part of our judicial system. And she has changed the perception of justice in our community.
what you want to be as a person, what you want to be as a judge, what you want to be as a wife, a mother. She just exemplifies all those great things.
They're talking about her tonight and how she is so over-prepared, and I'm like, but she was always around, and she came to every dance recital, so I don't know when she found the time. She's incredible.
We're all incredibly proud of all that you have done for the justice system in the state of California. Thank you so much.
I think I have only achieved what I've achieved because of our parents and because I've tried to keep up with you. And by aspiring to keep up with you, it's lifted me up. I love you.
Congratulations, Mom, Justice Audrey B. Collins, on this incredible award. So moved, and I'm so glad I got to be a part of it. Congratulations.
My fellow members of the Board of Trustees of the Los Angeles County Law Library, I want to thank all of you for coming and welcome you to the 2017 Beacon of Justice Gala this evening. It's a privilege for the board to be part of this program this evening and to join with all of you in honoring Justice Collins. Before we get started, I'd like to express my gratitude and that of the board for the Friends of the Law Library, whose generosity and tireless efforts continue to afford this library the resources necessary to meet the ever-increasing legal needs of our community. I'd like particularly to thank Mark Epstein, who is a colleague on the Superior Court now. His service as chair of the Friends Board ensured the ongoing success of that group and provided needed support for this library. And I'd like to thank Jordan Weiss, the incoming chairman. Jordan's dynamism, his willingness to serve, his visions for the library will keep the Friends organization vital and involved. We look forward to many more years of successful collaborations and accomplishments. So a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Anne. Welcome to our annual celebration of access to justice. It is sure to be a wonderful evening. In addition to our honoree, Justice Audrey Collins, let's take a moment and recognize some others in attendance, our past honorees. Steve English, Tom Girardi, Howard Miller, Justice Lee Smalley Edmond and Judge Richard L. Burgee, Justice Miriam A. Vogel, and Justice Charles Vogel, Justice Earl Johnson. I'd also like to welcome Supervisor Hilda Solis, who is with us this evening. And if I miss someone, rest assured your presence is noted and appreciated by all who are here. When you honor a person, you are of course giving a form of recognition to the person being honored. But in a very real sense, it is the rest of us who are being honored by their presence and by their participation in our activities. And that is the way it surely is with Justice Collins and with our guest speakers, Judge Virginia Phillips and Justice Nora Minella. We invite you to join with our honoree and our speakers in the Members Lounge for coffee and dessert later this evening. Please read your programs and learn a little more about the Law Library, and perhaps take some time to meet someone else who you don't know who's in the room tonight, because we're all here with a common purpose: access to justice. Access to justice has never been more important than it is today. Our government is threatening to shut off funding for the Legal Services Corporation, and our law library funding is at a 7-year low. I want to thank Mark Epstein, who has left us a Healthy Friends organization, and I thank you to Susan Steinhauser, our founder, who has been a fountain of wisdom and inspiration on a daily basis. And thank all of you for your continuing support. Last, I would like to take a few moments to remember some friends whom are no longer with us. Kevin Starr, Director Emeritus, was a speaker at our first gala, the State Librarian Emeritus, and noted as California historian. Kalman Zempleni, Friends Director, a longtime supporter, Executive Director and General Manager of the Rudder Group, Bon Vivant, and friend of many in the legal and self-represented communities.
Kalman's husband and partner, Ken Wright, is here this evening. John Vandekamp, longtime supporter, the voice for the Mildred Lilly video at our first gala, California Attorney General. Now please join me in welcoming our Executive Director, Sandy Levin.
Thank you, Jordan. Welcome to LA Law Library. We are so fortunate to be here together tonight. Tonight is truly an extraordinary night. We not only have food, we have fabulous food. We not only are surrounded by books, we're surrounded by one of the finest collections of legal resources anywhere in the world. We not only have colleagues who are educated and intelligent, we have beacons of justice, actual beacons of justice. And no one in the room is more grateful for tonight or what it means than I am. Because as I look around this room, I think about the people who are here the rest of the year. Because most days we serve a very different community here at LA Law Library. I think of a woman who came in with her adult special needs son. As I watched her struggle to keep him calm during her visit, I realized that every ounce of energy she had, every resource she had was going into caring for him. Of course, she had no money left to pay for an attorney to petition the court, and she was overwhelmed by everything that was already on her plate. So she came here to Bates Sedek's conservatorship clinic and learned how to obtain a conservatorship for him so she could continue to protect and care for him. I think of the elderly at-risk patron who was denied housing benefits. And although he had no legal background, he came here over and over again, determined to challenge the decision and not to end up homeless. On his most recent visit, he asked, what should a form of judgment in a writ of mandamus case look like? He had won his case, and the judge had determined he was eligible for benefits. I think of the woman whose life dream was to open a restaurant, but she didn't have the resources or any understanding of the legal rules and requirements. So she took our entire series on how to start and grow your own business, including the classes on how to form an entity, how to obtain funds, how to deal with business licenses and permits. And she came in many times with each hurdle that she encountered. And today, she has a small restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. I think of the woman who, this is a hard one, was held captive, raped and beaten repeatedly in her home country. She managed to escape, and she fled to this country with no possessions, turning herself in and throwing herself on the mercy of border agents. She was put into deportation proceedings with only an elementary school level of education and speaking no English and having to argue against government attorneys. The brand new self-help center at the Immigration Court referred her here to Esperanza's Asylum Workshop, where the instructors helped her fill out a petition for asylum. We don't always get to learn the stories of the patrons who come in asking for help, and usually we have no idea what becomes of them after they leave here. But we do know their desperation as they struggle to reunite with children who have been taken from them. Their frustration when the order of eviction is the first time they've heard of the lawsuit against them. Their anxiety over the safety of a child or grandchild living in deplorable conditions. Their anger over the caretaker taking financial advantage of their elderly parent or grandparent. The heartbreak over the death of a loved one who they cannot lay to rest because there are legal technicalities they don't understand. And the list goes on and on and on. At LA Law Library, when we say access to information is access to justice, that's what we mean. More than 30,000 requests More than 30,000 requests get answered at that reference desk right there every year. And that doesn't include the people who come in to research on their own, or to take a class, or participate in a workshop, or a clinic, pro bono week, law week, or our most popular program, Lawyers in the Library. So I think this is an extraordinary night for another reason. It is truly rare that we have the opportunity to celebrate and enjoy our good fortune, while at the same time doing something for those less fortunate. Everyone in this room shares a commitment to access to justice. Our generous sponsors and individual donors, our wonderful legal aid and social service partners, our cherished volunteers who give of their time to make programs and services available here. Last but not least, my amazing law library staff. About 20 of them are here volunteering tonight. They ensure that legal information and support is available 6 days and 1 evening each week here at Maine, and part-time at locations, 9 different locations throughout the county. Thank you to each and every one of you. Enjoy each other and enjoy whatever your role may be, that you are part of a greater good here. By honoring this most deserving recipient of the 2017 Beacon of Justice Award, we are also honoring every other Beacon of Justice in the room. Thank you. And it's my great pleasure to turn the microphone over now to our supervisor, the supervisor for the district in which we sit, Hilda Solis.
Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and thank you, Sandra, for all the work that you do here. It's incredible. But I also have to say that I have a special friend that's associated with you, and that's Susan Steinhauser, who's right here in front of me. I've known her for maybe 25 years. But she and I and others here in the room care about justice. And I think that's always been a part of my life, looking and seeking for justice, no matter if it has to deal with environmental, civil rights, domestic violence, and the fair representation for people to be able to have a voice. And now, more than ever, I think it's so important. Given what we're seeing happening back in Washington and how it is impacting what we're doing here in Los Angeles County, I appeal to you. I appeal to the angels to help us. We have so much more work to do. I thought I was over when I came back from Washington as a cabinet secretary in the Department of Labor. But I just figured it out that there's so many challenges and so many needs and so many people seeking our help and our assistance. And I'm happy and very proud to be able to represent the 1st District. And I'm very, very pleased that this particular library is a beacon of hope for so many people. That people are here to access the information, the resources, and are able to find people who will comfort them, give them guidance. You know, one of my lifelong dreams was to be a lawyer, believe it or not. But I had a professor at one of my undergraduate school who was known to be very rigorous. And if you didn't pass his class with a B, you could forget about going to law school. I got a B. I didn't go to law school, but the moral of the story is you don't have to be a lawyer to pass legislation. And I have a litany of legislation. Some of you are fully aware of that, whether it's dealing with domestic violence or environmental justice or housing or health care. There's a little footnote, maybe in someone's book, that will have my name, Solis, that is not a normal, traditional name. And that's what I think this is about, talking about people that are doing things outside of the ordinary. And maybe it is ordinary for us who live in Los Angeles and LA County, but we have a lot of gifts here. And I think this is a time very appropriate to honor individuals that are doing the right things, that maybe come to their work in different non-traditional ways, as I have. And I'm only one person. I'm not a justice, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a public servant. Don't call me a politician. I'm a public servant, just like you are. That's who elected me. And I'm here to say that we're here to support all of the work that you all do, but more importantly, individuals like Justice Collins. Please give her a big round of applause. It didn't dawn on me that Los Angeles County, after being away for maybe more than 12 years, a member of Congress and then 4 years also serving as a cabinet member, how many positive things have been happening here at home. But sometimes it takes coming back home to realize all the jewels that you really have. And to me, LA County right now is the only place that I want to be. I get so many people that ask me, oh my God, Supervisor or Hilda, aren't you so glad that you're not in Washington? And I have to kind of say, well, on the one hand, if I didn't go through all that, I wouldn't be here, because it taught me a lesson. It taught me a lesson that the work is not done and that there's more to be done. And there have to be more individuals that are going to help support the things that we believe in. And for me, justice is about everything that I have been inspired to do in my public life. And it comes from a very humble person who had no formal education, but in my life made a big difference, and that was my father, Raul Solis, who was a shop steward, organizer for the Teamster for workers in a battery recycling plant. But people don't know that before he married my mother, he was going to be assigned to become a priest in Mexico City. But he was being trained to be a lawyer. Amazing. And as a young child, growing up with my father, I reflect on what he would tell us. He would talk about Socrates and Plato. And I'm 4 or 5 years old, and I'm saying, Dad, what are you talking about? What does that mean? What meaning does that have for me? And now when I reflect back on all of that, I understand. And he taught me so much. But what it taught me more is that the value of what justice and standing up for what you believe in and understanding how you can have government and laws work to help improve conditions for people. That's what it taught me. My father taught me a great deal in that way. And I know he's listening to me now. He's probably smiling at me and saying, oh, Hilda, see, I told you that many years ago. And I didn't understand it, but now I do. And it's very clear to me that we need to have more support for legal aid and assistance and libraries like this that can help provide information to those that don't have access, that need to have that venue. Now, even more importantly, on Tuesday, we're going to be having 3 motions that are going to be coming before the board that I'm presenting on immigration. It's a very sensitive issue, and for some people it's very controversial, but it's not controversial for me, and I'll tell you why. It's about justice. It's about treating people with an equal value and making sure that the scales of justice also land on the right side for people that don't always have the means to be able to be heard. So I'm very, very pleased that we have a new board of supervisors, an enlightened board, I would say, because I remember growing up here and it was mostly male dominated. Not to say that in a bad way, but to say that times have changed and we have to be contemporary in the way we speak and the way that we deliberate and govern. And that means a lot. It means a lot today because there's a lot of strife that's going on in our public domain where people are trying to find where truth is and trying to find where that balance is. I'm not saying I know it all, I don't, but I'm happy to rely on people like you to help provide that balance and help to give us as policymakers that impetus and righteousness to know where we need to go for the people that we govern. I only represent 2 million people, but collectively, all the board, it's 10 million people. And there are probably more. But there are many people that don't believe that they are accounted for, that they have a real voice. So I'm hoping that people will understand how important it is to see value in the rule of law and how the rule of law has to be applied evenly for everyone, regardless of where you're born, what you look like, what credentials you have. And that is what I think our country needs the most, and this county of Los Angeles needs the most. I maybe sound like I'm talking in circles, but I'll be honest with you. It is a very weighty position to be on the Board of Supervisors these days. And it's one that I take very seriously. But I know that we need to have people like Justice Collins and others to be our standard bearers that are going to stand up and speak the truth and represent what is right in our society. And I know that she won't be the last, and that I expect in this room that we'll see many that will come forward. And I hope I can challenge you to understand the importance of having your guidance and that balance in every part of the county of Los Angeles. I represent some of the poorest area in the county, where people who live by the means of maybe $24,000 a year and less, because there are some households that are less, $15,000, family of 4, that are not even aware of a library like this that could provide them with so much help and guidance and maneuvering and processes to enable their children and themselves to have a better life. I want to bust open those doors and say this is the time to do it, to let people know that this is what LA County stands for and that we support this law library. And I want to see this as a beacon of hope for our future, because we need you now more than ever. And we need justices like Ms. Collins and others to follow in those footsteps. So I'm just here to say I'm proud to be here this evening. I know it's taken a while, Susan, for me to get here, but I've been there. And I know that the County Board of Supervisors is right here standing next to you, this new County Board of Supervisors. So I want to especially thank all of you, but I also have a presentation on behalf of the County Board of Supervisors. And for the first time in the history of the board, and I'm very proud of this, there are 4 women serving on the board. It has to be over 100 years. And we have Mark Ridley Thomas, who's also been a beacon of hope and a civil rights advocate. But for the first time, I think that we see a difference in terms of the direction and where we want to go, in terms of opening up, having more transparency, and having more access to education, to knowledge, and to justice, and to help to balance that semblance so that people understand that everyone can be treated equally. So I want to honor you, Justice Audrey Collins, and give you this Beacon of Justice Award, Friends of the Los Angeles County Library, in recognition of your service and your dedication and all the contributions that you've made. This is small in terms of what you've already done. So I want to thank you and congratulate you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Seeley.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Chief Judge Virginia Phillips, followed by Justice Nora Minella.
Thank you. I knew her when she was Judge Collins. I knew her when she was one of the little people like me. But Justice Collins, and to the trustees for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts on this really happy occasion about tonight's most deserving honoree, my friend, Audrey Collins. There's really so much that I would like to say and I could say about her. I mean, how do you sum up someone who is the granddaughter of a slave, who has spent her entire professional life in public service as a prosecutor, a federal judge, and at the time that most of us would have happily hung up our robes, embarked on an entirely new judicial path as a justice on the California Court of Appeal. She's the mother of 2 accomplished and successful children, and I would note that she is particularly proud that her daughter, as she said, was raised right. That means that she knows a lot about classic film. She's enjoyed 50 years of a happy marriage to Dr. Tim Collins. So how do I sum up this wonderful human being, this beacon of justice? So I decided to talk about 3 aspects of her life and work. I'm calling this not the 3 faces of Eve, in homage to her status as a dedicated movie buff, but the 3 faces of Audrey. As a judge, as a leader, and as a friend and mentor. First, the face of Audrey the judge. She is renowned, some might say notorious, for her intelligence, her diligence, her unfailing composure, even in the most challenging and pressured circumstances. But she's equally well known as a judge for her courtesy and her warmth. And while she handled many high-profile cases while she was on the federal trial court, including Humanitarian Law Project versus John Ashcroft, where she upheld certain challenges, constitutional challenges to the USA Patriot Act, a trademark infringement act about Betty Boop, and a First Amendment case over a billboard ordinance. I mean, a huge variety of cases. But the important thing is, for this beacon of justice, that it didn't matter whether it was a highly publicized case or one that was known only to the parties and the lawyers involved, got the same gold star treatment. One of her devoted law clerks told me, and all of her law clerks are devoted, by the way, to her, that Judge Collins is an extremely quick study. You could give her a huge filing, and she would distill it into the relevant matters and issues in no time. She's totally committed to her sole duty as a judge to do justice. And she's a judge to her very core, wanting to do the right thing in every situation, which is clear from her rulings and her public work, the way she runs a courtroom, but also clear from behind the scenes. This woman reported, and happily I would add, that she would sometimes get an email from Judge Collins at midnight on a Saturday night with her summary analysis and tentative ruling on 4 enormous motions that weren't even on the calendar for 3 weeks. And she just read every word of everything and had some thoughts about it to share. That whenever she went out of town, whether it was vacation or work, when she got back, she was so eager to start working that she would ask her staff to drop huge stacks of files off at her house so she didn't have to wait till the first work day to get started. This is a really devoted judge. So the second face of Judge Collins is that of a leader. She was the chief judge of the district court for 4 years. She was an extraordinary leader, and in particular, I wanted to mention what her leadership and vision brought to the court, but to many, many people, of the 19 million people in our district. She led the court through her vision to start two very innovative programs. And we think, maybe the first district court in the United States. First of all, the STAR program, which helps those who have just been released from federal prison to re-enter successfully into society. And our diversion program, which is called CASA, which stands for Conviction and Sentencing Alternatives, which gives usually first-time and nonviolent offenders with an underlying treatable problem that led to their criminal conduct a second chance. And so with lots of resources and support, and fulfilling many requirements, including a lot of community service hours, they can earn a sentence of probation or perhaps have the charges dismissed altogether. We were really a pioneer among federal courts thanks to her leadership. She brought together the United States Attorney, the top federal prosecutor in the district, our federal public defender, all the court agencies, and finally, all of the district judges on our court. We usually, well, not usually, sometimes don't even agree what side the sun comes up in the morning. And she shepherded these programs through skepticism and doubts as a masterful leader. And a couple of people who were involved in getting these amazing programs off the ground told me, well, first of all, Audrey Barat, who's now Judge Barat, and he's here tonight, but at the time he was our U.S. Attorney. And he said that one great example of her leadership was implementing these innovative conviction and alternative sentencing programs that she worked tirelessly with all the stakeholders to build a solid foundation for the program and had the vision and commitment to ensure the program's success. Now, his counterpart, Sean Kennedy, who was our public defender at the time, weighed in and said that she was the driving force in implementing these programs. And while it's hard to believe now because they have been such a success and saved so many lives, but at the time there was a lot of resistance to both of the programs. The judiciary budget was tighter than usual. Officials in DC and judges were afraid that this holistic rehabilitative approach to services would exhaust scarce resources to the detriment of other programs, and even worse, that the untested diversion program might fail, which would be an embarrassment to everyone involved. But, as he said, Judge Collins understood the importance of advancing social justice by reducing the rate of incarceration and giving people on the edge a chance to escape felony conviction altogether. And so she engaged with skeptical judges, pushed pretrial services, pushed the probation office, and with the leadership also of Audrey Barat and the defense bar, I guess, is that 7? Because I wanted to call it the Magnificent 7. To work together to make STAR and CASA a reality. She is a force of nature. And she also demonstrated a personal investment in the success of the participants by attending our graduations, celebrating afterwards with everyone and their families. And as Sean Kennedy pointed out, when the chief judge steps down from the bench to interact with the dispossessed people most affected by social problems and the criminal justice system, it makes a statement. Judge Collins' example inspired the rest of the team to work together, despite all the obstacles, to make these programs successful. Now, one of the probably the most rewarding thing that I've ever gotten to do as a judge was to be one of the CASA judges. I worked every week with the participants and the other members of the team. And whenever we held our graduation ceremonies, each participant was required to get up and speak. And all these people who'd worked so hard and turned their lives around would say, "This program saved my life, thank you." And I would always say, "Thank Chief Judge Collins," because she's the one that brought it to life. One of the things that marks someone as a leader is the ability to inspire others to go into battle with them. And she has that mark of leadership because she inspired all of us to do all the hard work to implement these programs and bring them to success. No charade there. Another person who told me about her work as a chief judge and as a leader was her attendance at every event that anyone asked her to speak at, almost every night, because she genuinely wanted all the groups the different bar groups, affinity groups, and so forth, to feel like they were a part of the court. The theme of her leadership was to support other people who were doing difficult work. And someone observed to me, this required her to do a lot of listening, which can be very hard to do when you're running a big operation. But she's kind and warm, and she always made it look easy. No sign of vertigo there, no matter how much she was juggling. So finally, the third face of Audrey Collins is that of a mentor and a friend. She is known as someone who respects and cares for everyone, the litigants, the counsel, court employees, and her own staff. She got to know so many people so well, and participated in what staff was doing, whether it was going to a performance where someone was singing or otherwise performing. And what I particularly liked was she's a great reader. She exchanged books with me. She's very good about returning books, by the way, so don't fear. If you lend her a book, you'll get it back. But not just with me, with lots of members of court staff who shared her love of novels and particularly mysteries. She's thoughtful, she's generous with her colleagues, and everyone else she comes into contact to, but she goes the extra mile and reaches out to people who are suffering and need some extra support and help. And then finally, I have to mention the other Audrey. She's a big fan of Audrey Hepburn. They have much in common. But beyond the superficial things, the beauty, the grace, the really important thing that they share in common, which is what I want to end on here when I talk about this beacon of justice, is Audrey Hepburn was known as a great humanitarian and spent decades around the world as a spokeswoman for UNICEF and other causes. She too was a beacon of justice, but we have our own special beacon that we're recognizing tonight, and I'm very proud to do so. Thank you.
Good evening. I took my time limitations fairly seriously, so I will be brief. One of the happiest moments of my professional life came in the summer of 2014. I was in my car. I remember precisely where I was. I was on an on-ramp to the 134 when my cell phone rang, and it was Audrey, my former colleague and still friend, telling me that she had been appointed to the California Court of Appeal. I was thrilled for her. When she went on to tell me that she had been appointed to Division 4, the division on which I sit with presiding Justice Norm Epstein and my colleague Tom Wilhide, I was delirious. This time not so much for her, but for us. At her induction, Justice Epstein said that the fact that we now had 2 federal court alums on the Division 4 was a felicitous sign of federal-state comity. But I'm a little less tactful than Norm, and I like to say that it's just the official recognition that the Central District Bench is the farm team for Division 4. So, Ginny, anytime you're ready, you just let us know. We'll put those wheels in motion. Of course, Audrey and I had been colleagues on the district court, but as trial judges, obviously our relationship was a little bit different. We saw each other primarily in court and committee meetings. I was always so impressed with how she handled herself. She was always so thoughtful. She was always such a good listener. And when she did speak, it was always in an effort to arrive at a consensus, whose bottom line was not her as an individual district court judge, but the betterment of the court. Nevertheless, as trial judges, obviously we did not collaborate on individual decision-making in our individual trial courts. The Court of Appeal, of course, is quite different. We do act collectively. We have to, or we certainly try to agree not only on the result, but on how to achieve it, how to get there. What makes Audrey such an ideal colleague is not only her intellectual candle power, not only her analytical rigor, not only her lack of ideological bias, not only her complete mastery of the record, not only her legendary diligence, but her open-mindedness. There is no issue, and there has never been a case, in which I didn't feel comfortable talking openly and candidly with Audrey. It's never about her. It's never about ego. It's always about getting it right. She is the ideal colleague not only because of her own thoughtful and considered views, but because of the respect and consideration that she gives to others' views. There is nothing so rewarding as working with a colleague whose sole commitment is to getting it right and who is willing to put in the time, effort, and what I call brain squeezing to achieve that result. And that is Audrey Collins. Now, Audrey, at this point, I could turn awkwardly and hug you, but that would reek of recent Supreme Court hearings, and so I'm not going to do that. I was told, however, that it would be nice if I could share a personal anecdote about Audrey that others might not know. And to be honest, and I'm really very sorry to say this, I have no dirt on her, none whatsoever. I have, however, seen her angry. And how she handles anger tells you something about who she is. The occasion was oral argument. An attorney had raised several, the appellant's attorney had raised several issues in the trial court. Appeal had expressly conceded one of those issues and briefed the others. But come oral argument, the attorney gets up, and the first point that he starts to argue is this one he's expressly conceded in his brief. And looking somewhat puzzled, Justice Collins leans over and says, "Excuse me, counsel, but didn't you expressly concede that point in your opening brief?" He looked at his papers and paused and said, "Well, that was a mistake." And she said, in a voice that would etch glass, "A mistake?" No response. And then she said it one more time, this time even more softly, but with at least 4 S's and 2 K's. Mistake? Counsel quickly moved on to his next point. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Audrey Collins in a fury. No throwing of gavels, no hurling of imprecations at the lawyer, but a forceful expression, if an indirect one, of her views while maintaining impeccable judicial demeanor. Audrey, I said it was one of the best days of my professional life when I learned that you were going to join our court, but if anything, I underestimated our good fortune. I underestimated how lucky I was, how lucky we as a court are, and how lucky the citizens, lawyers, and litigants of California are to have you. And I know I speak for all of your colleagues, federal and state, past, present, and even future, when I say how delighted we are that you are receiving this prestigious recognition for which you are so overwhelmingly deserving.
I know it would be a mistake to say anything following the women on this stage. Justice Collins. Congratulations. Let's get a photo. Who can get a photo?
Good evening, and thank you to the Friends of the Los Angeles County Law Library. And thank you, Jenny and Nora, for your terrific remarks about someone I didn't quite recognize. I'm honored to receive the 2017 Beacon of Justice Award and to be recognized in the company of past recipients since 2005, including the first recipient, my presiding Justice Norman Epstein, as well as many other justices from the Second District Court of Appeal who have been recognized here tonight. It is a special honor to receive this award from the second largest public law library in the United States, one which places special emphasis on meeting the needs of the courts, the public, and self-represented litigants through its outreach programs. The library played a major role in my childhood, as I'm sure it did for many of you. Our home had tons of books, and we must have received almost every weekly and monthly magazine. Newsweek, Life, Look, Ebony, Crisis, and Good Housekeeping were just a few. But my mother still took me to the local library every week so I could experience what a special place it was, and of course, could get into the habit of borrowing and returning books. I still recall the excitement of carrying home newly borrowed books after the librarian had pulled the small paper checkout sheet from its flap and stamped it in blue ink with its return date. And if you remember that too, you are of a certain age. There's another thing that has always made libraries, whether it's one room in a small town, as it was where I grew up, or this magnificent edifice in the heart of Los Angeles, so special. Whether we're children or adults, a library is an oasis of calm that allows us to dream, to broaden our horizons, and to imagine the possibilities that lie before us. Of course, there are other important sources of inspiration. Through their examples, my parents taught my brothers and me to also imagine those possibilities. At the same time, they taught us to recognize the importance of service to the community. My mother was not only a teacher in Philadelphia, but also a leader who helped to organize African American residents in our neighborhood to build a swimming pool and club when the Caucasian members of the Aiden Swim Club would not allow us to swim with their members. And my father practiced dentistry for 50 years in an underserved community of color in Chester, Pennsylvania, while many of his colleagues left to practice in the literally greener pastures of the suburbs. I've been not only proud but happy to have a career in public service, first with the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, and then with our federal and state courts. I'd like to introduce and recognize my family. First, my ever-supportive husband, Dr. Tim Collins, whose his career was also in public service, most recently as Los Angeles County Dental Director. On a personal note, though I think it's been mentioned, our 50th wedding anniversary is in June, although it's been 52 years since we met. And one of the pictures that has pride of place out in the lobby and that magnificent display put together by the staff members here is, in fact, a picture of us at Howard University weeks after we met at homecoming in front of the A building. Also here tonight are our son, Tim Jr., our daughter, Rachel Miner, and my brother, Bruce Brody, Chief Deputy in the Alternate Public Defender's Office. I always like to say he used to be known as my brother, and now I'm known as just his sister. Members of my judicial family have also joined us. I'm not sure where they are, but they're still here. Attorneys Kristen Rouse and Rebecca Leffler. And my judicial assistant, Anna Gonzalez. I'd like to thank all of you for attending, and again, thank the Friends of the Los Angeles County Law Library for this award. Thank you.